Welcome to Shrink to Shrink, a psych view on the films with Dr. Colleen Mullen and Courtney Calkins, bringing lessons learned from the big screen into our own lives.
Well, hello, all you children. This is the daddy, and here comes the mommy of
Mommie Dearest, please.
Of Shrink to Shrink, Colleen Mullen. How are you?
Well, I'm great, Courtney. How are you?
You know, when I first married my wife, she would always call her mom Mommie Dearest. But they got along great. I mean, they're best friends. They go out all the time. And I had never seen Mommie Dearest before, so I was like, how do you not pick up something when in our culture because it's so quoted? But I just watched the movie for the first time, and I'm traumatized.
Had you really not ever seen the movie?
No, never.
We're like the same age practically, and that was like an iconic film.
Yeah.
Growing up.
Yeah, but who wants to watch a movie about child abuse?
I don't know. Like, it's a curiosity thing.
I guess so. For me, I just hadn't. But I did listen to a radio show that cut up a bunch of the clips and would play them all the time. Of course, the no wire hangers, yes. Of course. But and then I understood after we picked this film and you pulled the which clips and then I was putting them together and I was like, dang it, there's so many cool clips that not only do we have, and I don't know if we'll use them all, but we have 19 from the movie. Whew.
Wow, I think that's almost a record for us.
Yeah, I think it is. But I actually had to put together another clip of all there's like 4 that I think are iconic, and I boiled them down into 1 minute. So I thought we'd start off just to remind people about, how sweet and kind this lady is to her child.
We can introduce that we are actually going to cover all of Mommie Dearest.
Yes,
this is for Mother's Day. This is
Mother's
awesome
Day.
That we're doing this for Mother's Day.
Yeah.
For all the bad mommies out there.
Everybody I told just kind of shook their head and went, you guys.
And everybody I told was like, oh my God, you need to do this movie. That's going to be fantastic.
Were they therapists that you talked to?
No.
Oh, really? Okay. See, mine was more around the office, but because I think it's hard. It's hard to listen to, and I believe, I don't know about you, Colleen, but I will end up making light of this movie. It actually is known as there's some comedic factors to it. You watch it and you can really laugh if you get past all the horror. And
it is, a camp version of the book. And I did some background research because, in fact, somebody, who was it? One of the guys on Nerds with Words, when I talked to them on that podcast and told them about it, he said that John Waters actually does like a whole commentary on it on some anniversary version of the movie. And I couldn't actually get my hands on that beforehand, but I watched several interviews with Christina Crawford, who is the daughter who wrote the book.
Right.
And so the book had a life of its own in one way. And then this movie, of course, has become a cult classic.
Yeah. Yeah, and it received like the most Razzies ever. I mean, it was panned horribly, which I understand because now time is not a factor here, but looking back, it just looked cheesy and like very pedestrian and almost like shot like a sitcom or a TV show. There really wasn't any cinematography in it, so nothing really to appreciate film-wise, but it looked like it was like someone just said, okay, let's make this movie, and they decided to make it, and it turned out to be really, really good. There's a lot of psychological stuff here, and we're going to run headlong into it and try to generalize it for some of the good mothers out there too, and fathers and children. I guess we're all children at some point. But so here's 1 minute of what I consider 4 of the classic quotes.
Christina! Christopher! Damn it! Colleen, I have asked you to keep the children quiet today! And for Christ's sake, get them out of the garden!
She's in the rose garden.
Tina! Bring me the axe!
Yes, Mommy.
Yes, Mommy, what?
Yes, Mommy Dearest.
When I told you to call me that, I wanted you to mean it.
Why can't you treat me the way I would be treated by any stranger on the street? Because I am not one of your fans!
fuck with me, fellas! This ain't my first time at the rodeo.
The only F word in there. That was.
Yeah.
Wow.
I love that scene.
It's chilling. She is so chilling. And it was funny. I was brewing on what I would consider as a diagnosis for her. And I'm like, okay, is it somewhere in the narcissistic, but probably borderline? And then I go on IMDb and it said keywords. First keyword, borderline personality. And I'm like,
nice.
Okay, so other people have hit. Is that what you were thinking?
Yeah, borderline narcissist, and we're talking about borderline personality disorder, not like on the borderline of being a narcissist for those teaching the lingo. And then, of course, the substance abuse. She was also chronically alcoholic, and there might have been pill dependence in there after some interviews that I was listening to, that they didn't show that then, but it would have made sense in the 70s that there was a lot of pill popping along with the alcoholism, but she was chronically alcoholic in that movie.
Yeah, knowing that the daughter had written it, I was like looking at some of the scenes going, how did she must have done interviews or whatever, because the daughter wasn't in those. But we did follow her when she went to boarding school and, not much at home other than when she came home. So you could tell it was from her perspective, actually. So do we want to start off with just how she deals with her, I want to say servants, but they're actually maids. They're probably employees.
Yes, and in this scene, I wanted this scene shown only because it really sets it up that Joan Crawford, the persona in the movie of Joan Crawford, the way that they're portraying her in the movie, her personality. I wanted this clip shown because it shows that she's just a bitch to everybody. She wasn't singled out just to the kids. It was anybody pretty much behind closed doors that she had authority over, that it seemed that she was able to then try to manipulate or bully into things. And so I thought this scene, which is pretty early in the movie, where she gets mad at one of the housekeepers, was pretty indicative of the way she treated everyone that she had authority over behind closed doors.
Caroline, help me with this. When you polish the floor, you have to move the tree. If you can't do something right, don't do it at all.
I'm sorry, Miss Crawford.
All right, give me the soap. See, Caroline, you have to stay on top of things every single minute. Okay. Caroline, do you get that?
Yes, Miss Crawford.
Helga, I'm not mad at you. I'm mad at the dirt. Yes, ma'am. Come on.
Which I think is a great line, right? I'm not mad at you, I'm mad at the dirt.
It's like almost she almost catches herself being too rough on people and pulled it back.
Yeah, almost.
It's not you, it's the dirt.
Right. I found it kind of interesting, and I know that people who would just watch this movie once, because I don't know why you'd watch it more than once, or haven't watched it in a long time, probably didn't pick up on it. But so it starts with that one, the floor, and then the big beating scene of Tina ends in the floor. And then when she's talking about her life going south and how she was raised, she talked about working her way through school cleaning floors. So floors is her thing.
Well, and then cleaning. So it's also, maybe we would throw in a bit of OCD, that cleaning was one of her ways of calming down, that when we get to the scene that everybody knows about, the wire hangers, that scene ends with her on the floor in the bathroom trying to scrub it clean. And when people get flooded with emotions, they often do engage in some behavior that calms them down. And for her, it was after these rages, she would then clean the floors.
Yeah, she was meticulous, and I ran that scenario in my head. I'm like, okay, is she OCD? And she's definitely not OCD, but she's particular about things, and she's a single at this point lady who is looking to add to her family, and so here she's on the beach talking to her then boyfriend, kind of promotion guy, almost agent-ish producer type.
You know what's missing in my life?
A hit movie. Come on, you've got everything you want.
No, I don't. I want a baby.
A baby?
Yeah. You know I've always wanted a kid.
You're too vain to be pregnant.
Vain. I can't have one. I was pregnant 7 times with Francho. I lost them all. I'm gonna adopt one.
Out of the question.
What do you mean?
I mean, no agency would give you a baby.
How do you know?
I'm a lawyer.
Bend the law.
Bend the law. Joan, you're an actress. You've been divorced twice. Adoption agencies can be brutal. Besides, a baby needs a father.
Father. A father. I never had a father. Ma changed husbands faster than she changed bed sheets. Ma, full of sloppiness and dirt. You know, hard times is good for people, I tell you it is. Would I be where I am if I hadn't had them? I could be a mother and a father. I know how to teach a kid to take care of himself and amount to something. I know I could.
Maybe you could. One thing's certain. You'd sure get a lot of publicity.
You know, I've had my share of interactions with adoption workers, and it continues to this day. And I honestly, as a general rule, don't like them. I really don't like adoption workers very much because, in my mind, when you are an adoption worker, you are really playing God. Okay, because God is the person who gives children to families, right? And so they're matching children and families, and my experience tells me that they believe that they are the only ones who can properly match a child and a parent, and that bothers me. But I got to give it to them in this movie. They decline her as they should.
For me, though, I thought about it, and and I have a brother who's adopted, and we always say he was the firstborn in the family anyway. He's 8 months older than me and was around before I was born. And he was done through the same way Joan eventually got her babies, through an attorney's office, which is how it was done in the 70s. This was 1970 when my family adopted. This was 1980. Oh, no, it would have been in the 50s or 60s when this adoption was going on for Joan Crawford. And so, but the way Christina talks about it, the girl who wrote the book, the daughter, she talks about it as being bought, that she bought the kids. And I guess that's one way to look at it, because money was involved back in the day. And certainly today it happens when you do private adoptions. There is money involved, is my understanding. When you talk about like adoption and placement, I have seen families that could provide kids with everything that they ever wanted, not getting approved for adoption, or not getting the chance. They'll get approved, but only a certain age, and then they never get a call for a kid. It's crazy. It's very haphazard, and you have average people making judgment calls like individually, as you're saying, towards these families. Who's to say that, I mean, in this day and age, a woman who's been divorced twice and self-sufficient, who's to say that she should not be able to be a parent? I would hope that the standard has changed on that. Now, we can strip back, and if they explored Joan's life and saw the alcoholism or the attitudes, or spoke to her housekeepers as like character references, maybe that's why she didn't get it also. But this also showed how much the adoption people controlled things back in the day. And there's also something about it as far as the Hollywood system back in the day, that that she needs to keep up appearances, and if she did, it could be great publicity for her, but it also may ruin her reputation.
Yeah, I would have rejected her, but not for the reasons that that attorney who she was walking on the beach with said. But in her grandiosity, she clearly thought, I could be mother and father, I could be aunt, uncle, I could be everything. But so when she's interacting with Christina, and I agree with this is kind of cool. And one of the things that I've talked to adoption workers who I like about is, if you look at like Jesus was adopted. Superman was adopted, right? Because if Jesus' dad is God, well, Joseph adopted him. So, that's one way to look at it. And then Superman, obviously, he came from Krypton, and he was adopted. So there are some real wonderful things about being adopted. And Joan
Crawford.
Collins. No, Joan. Okay, yes. Joan Crawford. She tells Christina why kids who are adopted have it better.
Oh, Mommy. Thank you. She's so beautiful. What should I name her?
Is that the present you like best?
Oh, yes.
Then that's the present you can keep. We'll take the rest to the orphans who don't have anything. And tomorrow we'll write our thank you notes.
Oh, you know what? I was trimming down the clips, and I cut off the part about adopted kids are more fortunate because they are chosen. But that came at the end of that picking one gift.
That's
But
right.
what do you think about that picking one gift idea?
In theory, it's really nice, but usually kids are set up to know that before they get into the party, right? I've known of people that kind of say, okay, well, let's give something away, right? Mm-hmm. But what happened was you got this little girl who must have been about, I don't know, 6 or 7 at the time, maybe 8. And she gets to fall in love with all of her presents the way little kids do on those special days. And then is told, okay, well, it was almost just out of the blue. Well, if that's the one you really love, then we're giving all the rest away to the orphans.
Yeah. That's kind of sad.
Pick the one that you want.
I had a family that I think they had 6 or 7 kids. They were Mormon, and so they had lots of kids. And I thought they
You're so religious today, Courtney.
Well, it's part
Mormons.
of it. It is part of it. Yeah, Jesus is adopted. Yeah, it's all, well, I'm just coming off Easter. So, yeah. But one of the things they did was they gave each kid a laundry basket. The size of a laundry basket, for the clean laundry, not a hamper, but one of those. And they could keep anything they could fit in there. Because when Christmas came around, their house would fill up, because they had lots of relatives and friends and family. I couldn't do that. But yeah, so it was kind of it was just, given in the context of Joan Crawford, it just seemed cruel again. And the husband or whoever found a way around it when he gave Christina a gift, and she said, well, I really like it, but I don't want to take it because I can only keep one thing. And he said, oh, okay, well, let me take it back. I'll give it to you at another time. So that was a good roundabout.
Right. And Joan did come around on that and let her keep both the bracelet and the doll. But it still was, it came across as cruel because, again, the timing of it too. It was, here, you fell in love with everything. Now we're going to strip it all away. You don't get it.
Yeah, and one of the things that you and I do and have done is we counsel children. And when you counsel children, you play with them. And when you play with them, sometimes you play games. And Joan Crawford, Mommie Dearest, has a competition. She races her daughter in the backyard pool. And this is how it ends.
You lost again.
It's not fair. You're bigger than I am. It's not fair to win twice.
But nobody ever said that life was fair, Tina. I'm bigger and I'm faster. I will always beat you.
Then I'm not going to play with you anymore. Ever.
Good choice, Tina.
That's right. Who'd want to play with her?
Ever use that tone of voice with me, Missy? Who do you think you're talking to? I'll tell you what you're gonna do. You're gonna march yourself upstairs to your room and you will stay there until I tell you to come out.
No, I won't.
No, you won't. Yes, you will.
Ow! Ow! I won't go.
All right.
I won't go.
You will stay in here until you are ready to behave.
I won't.
And to apologize.
I won't.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm laughing. The problem I have as a parent is I couldn't be as foolish as Mommie Dearest is here, because she says, "Don't you give me that tone." I'm like, wait a minute, who has the worst tone in this conversation? It's Mommy, so I couldn't be that much of a hypocrite, and say, "Don't you yell at me, I'll yell at you." But she's scary.
That's the problem, and that is why we have so many families involved in, we'll say, the social system, social work system, CPS, all that stuff, because a lot of it is do as I say, not as I do. And
Right.
That is Joan's model of how to behave. do as I say, and I'm telling you to be proper in this way, but don't do as I do because I'm a royal bitch,
right,
and gonna hurt somebody.
Right. And okay, so then I'll ask you as therapist, when you were playing games with kids, I have the way I did it. Would you let them win, or like, let's say you played checkers or you played chess or you played some game, would you like intentionally let them win, or would you beat them? And because when they would beat me, sometimes I'd be like, well, I'm your therapist. I'm supposed to be building your self-esteem, when they legitimately beat me, just messing around. But
well, I would say it depends on the kid and the age and what they're working on, what their issues are. There are certainly some kids where it was just fun to like really play competitively. Like if you had a smart 12-year-old and you're playing chess, sure, I'm going to play and hope that I win. Most of the time they would beat me though.
Yeah.
But then when you got 5-year-olds or 7-year-olds playing Minicala with the marbles, I let them win a lot of times. It all depends on what they need too.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
Is it good for a kid to learn disappointment and lose? And even if it was though, I'm not going to rip them to shreds and say, you know what, kid, you're never going to, you're never winning because I'm bigger and faster and I always will be. And I thought how much, like, for a kid who is experiencing abuse by the person telling her that, how frightening and how like just earth crushing that would have been to have experienced her saying that. Because no matter what you think, because when you're getting abused and you're a little kid, you think, well, someday I'm going to be bigger. Someday I'm going to be able to do this and take her on. And she was letting her know that there was going to be no day ever in her life that she could get past her.
Yeah.
And I thought that just the choice of words was really telling, and also had like this longer lasting impact than just this one experience for her in the swimming pool.
Yeah, I'm sure she never won at a game against her mom. I mean, there's no way, because even in the movie, Joan was upset when other actresses got starring roles. She wanted them all, and she wanted to win everything, and she wanted to have everything.
Well, and the narcissism really came through. We don't have any of these scenes, but about, I think, getting let go of her contract with MGM or whatever it was.
Yeah,
it was back in the day. I don't know if they still do that in Hollywood, where actors get signed on for a certain amount of deals. But it used to be that the actor would be associated with the production company or the movie making company. And so she was getting let go of contracts, and yet you could see like it was that thing that happens when someone's who's narcissistic and they get told, okay, well, the door just closed on you. Like she implodes on herself, and you see her hold her head up and walk out the office. But man, she is all sorts of messed up inside, and then takes it out at home. Yeah.
I mean, the correct parental response when you beat a child in a race, because I've done that, she gave her a head start. She still beat her. Is, hey, you know what? You did very well. You were very close. Obviously, I'm bigger. I'm going to be able to swim faster than you. But you know what we should do? Let's pick out a personal best for you. Let's time you from end to end and see if you can get better and faster against your own time. Instead of rubbing it in and spanking her and throwing her in the room. So, but that, of course, the abuse doesn't stop there. That's the first time we see it. And here, this is one of the scenes, as much as I kind of smile and laugh and have fun, this one, more than some of the others, really broke my heart. When Tina is sitting in front of Mom's mirror, addressing the crowd and thanking all her fans, brushing her hair and, working, like all girls do. They play dress up, and she's doing it here, and Mommie Dearest just totally misinterprets it, and wow.
I'm so grateful to you all, my wonderful fans, who have made me a star. Mommy.
What do you think you're doing?
Nothing, Mommy. I was just playing.
What do you mean playing? Pawing through my things? Making fun of me?
I wasn't making fun of you. I was just trying to... I was acting. Play acting. Like you're always doing.
Look at yourself.
hard to listen to. I actually, a lot of these, when the abuse starts, I just cut them off.
I was going to say, you didn't even get to the harshest part of this scene. And what Mommie Dearest does is actually cuts her hair off in clumps.
Yeah.
And just strips her of essentially strips the kid of her dignity.
Yeah.
And then she has this ongoing reminder of just how horrific her mother is.
You know, I said that I hadn't seen this movie before, but my wife had. And so she said, you know what, I went and saw it in 1981. She saw it in the theater, and she said she cried all the way through it, her and her brother. I mean, but I said, but you weren't in an abusive home. It wasn't like it was tapping. She says, no, but it was really hard to watch. And I, even to this day, as much abuse as I encountered, you know, in my line of work, it's brutalizing to see somebody just kind of tear the id or ego or just the soul of a child apart with how this mom treats her daughter, when she wasn't making fun of her, she wasn't doing anything wrong, she was doing everything right, and mom just knew she had the right interpretation of what was going on, and she was going to run with it to its conclusion, which was abuse.
Right. And she's doing exactly what little girls do. They idolize their mothers even when they're abusive. I mean, like they want to be like their mother on their best day. So her mother is always in front of, I mean, she was just practicing to live a life like her mother did. And mom interpreted, as you said, she just was convinced that she had the right interpretation and got violent because of it. And now this is something that, you know, in a lot of the counseling that I do, that I'm sure you do as well, we're talking about what's the alternative interpretation of this, right? Because had Joan not immediately walked in and said, oh, you're mocking me, that was her interpretation. If she walked in and said, oh my gosh, how cute, she's practicing to be an actress and get awards, that would have been a whole different scene. I think so much that we do is working on helping parents look at what's the alternative. I can think of examples just in the last couple of weeks that I've had where, you know, the parents are not even close to acting like Joan Crawford, but they get upset and they'll tell me about things that went wrong with their kid, and we'll go over the scene for them and say, well, what happened? And go, well, you know, and then they, you know, in fact, will find out sometimes from the kid that they really didn't have that intention. And then they feel bad. They feel guilty, right? Because good parents feel guilty when they've done their kid wrong. Yeah. Joan doesn't, because she is just out for herself.
Well, she's never wrong. So
yes,
it's hard to apologize when you're never wrong. Yeah. To me, I think that if you could ask a couple clarifying questions before you jump to your conclusion, people don't do that though. They're operating from an emotional state. They're not trying to actually figure it out. You know where it happens the worst, and I'm sure you run into this too, is what I call two-dimensional communication, email and texting. People misinterpret and jump to conclusions all the time.
I can't stand email and text communication, especially among couples and relationships. And
I've started to refer my especially mediation divorcing couples who that's pretty much all they do. They're either on the web at some, you know, like Talking Parents or Our Family Wizard or something like that, or they're texting or emailing. And I recommend the book Biff. It's like $10 or $11 online, and it's dealing with high conflict communication in a digital world. So they talk about how, they actually have examples of, here, if someone writes this, don't respond to these two parts, but just respond and say, yeah, Thursday at 10 will be great. Don't respond to and you're always late and better have them dressed right. And, you know, make sure you feed them because last time they came home hungry and dirty. You know, just say, yep, 9 o'clock, we'll meet at McDonald's. See you then. You know, that, so it teaches couples how to dodge some of those bullets of misinterpretation. So it's helpful.
And we should say, for as much as I can't stand it for ongoing couples who have conflicts and things like that, but there's times when when you're going through divorce and mediation and custody and things like that, where you have to, it's safest for everybody to just have written communication so it's documented and you get the emotionality hopefully out of it, right? But ongoing for couples to communicate, there's so much interpretation, or if we look at this between parents and let's say, teenagers
all the time,
talking about where they are, where they want to be picked up. I mean, if you pick up the phone and say, well, it's around the corner and 2 doors left of this store at the mall, pick me up there. It's better than saying, yeah, that store, and just naming it, because the parent might get frustrated, right? And say, well, I thought you were here and not here. And everything can go wrong with texting, and especially when you've got really reactive people at the receiving end of it.
Yeah.
But this, of course, is way before those days.
Yeah.
There was no texting back then.
They had dial telephones. She actually had to dial the telephone, not push button, dial telephone. I choose not to argue or fight over that stuff. I'm like, well, let's talk about it when I get home, because as we know, the relationship and the message, the true meaning, is carried in the nonverbal and tone. Neither of which do you have in those 2 dimensionals. So, all right. So you've talked about the fact that she, Joan Crawford, right? Please say, okay, Mommie Dearest, say that she drinks, and here's a scene of that.
Hauling me over to Mayor's table like some picked-up floozy. Or one of those starlets out to give the big shots a nice night in town. Is that what you think of me?
How many drinks is that? When you were a kid, that made you look sexy. Now it just makes you look drunk.
She throws a drink on him.
You may as well have property of MGM tattooed on my backside. Damn it, Perino's is my place.
Nobody wanted my signature, so I just walked in.
You expect me to ignore my fans? They're life and death to me, baby. They're the ones who really made me.
I expect you to walk in with me and sit down at your table with me. Then Mayor would have to bring his bankers over, introduce them, get your autograph, and leave. That's what you should have done.
Well, maybe that's what I would have done. If you'd been nice enough to stay out there with me, help me through the crowd and into the restaurant like a gentleman.
Why are you screaming?
Because I'm damn mad.
And I'm drunk. Yeah, don't argue with drunk people. Never argue with the drunk. And again, the communication and the different experiences of the same event. And he did very well at saying, look, this is what I did, and this is why I did it. And I think that it would have gotten what you wanted as the goal. But you did your own thing, and then you try to blame me. And then when he brings it up and is confrontational and said, this is what it is, and then she just flips it to something else. Well, maybe if you were more of a gentle, it's like they just go into this back and forth blame game, which when you're arguing with a drunk person, especially, that's what you're going to get.
Right. So I think of like resolution for that, since we have people are listening and learning along with this, what we're doing here. The resolution for that, for a couple who knows like that, like they have someone who's getting some public attention or whatever, that there's obstacles to overcome when they go in public, is to talk about the expectations of each other before they go on something like that. So this couple, if they were healthy and communicating, they would have set themselves up to be more successful at this, and said before they went out to dinner, they would have maybe Joan would have said, I need your help to get through the crowd. I don't want to ignore the fans, but I want you to stay with me. Right? Because then they still would have ended up together.
Like a
or
handler.
He would have said, I need you to
move through quickly. Let's get into the restaurant. Don't stop. I will, deflect the fans. That way you don't look like a jerk, and we will get to the table. And then Metro Golden Mayor, or whatever his name was, would come over to us, and it would be, kind of a power play in that way. So, but couples do that all the time. Like, I mean, when my wife and I, especially when we were first married, we had to develop a code at parties and stuff, because when I introduce her to somebody, I'm like, hey, this is my wife, Deborah. And then I wouldn't say the other person's name. She would know that I didn't know the other person's name, and she would introduce herself, shake their hand, and then they would put their own name in. So, or
Nice.
or if you take someone to a party, you're like, don't leave me with this person, or don't leave me alone. Stay with me. I may look comfortable, but so there's all kinds of different preventative conversations that couples can have to avoid these things, unless you're drinking scotch all night long.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And once that happens, it's all out the door.
Yeah, Katie bar the door. Okay, so we're back to Tina and her mom, and they're sitting down and having steak for lunch. I find that interesting, but it was a big piece of steak, and they were eating it for lunch. And
It's low carb,
I almost took this one out, but I cut it down to be really, really short because I got something to say about it.
Christina, eat your lunch. You are not getting up from this table until you have finished that meat.
Okay, the reason that I actually decided to leave it in was I was a terrible eater, still am a terrible eater, when I was young. And I remember for hours sitting at the table, my mom would sit with me until I finished my food. And she would set the timer and then this and that because I was done. I didn't want to eat. I didn't want to eat that. And if I didn't have to eat the rest of the night, that was okay. I was like, I'm not eating that and I'm not going to eat it. And you could sit here all day and I'm not going to eat it. So just know that I'm going to miss the food or let me serve up my own plate or whatever. But that didn't happen in this case. She sat there for hours.
Well, and then she put it back in the fridge, and for every meal subsequently, for this, I saw this in an interview too, that I think I documented it for our notes as 2 days. It was the only meal that Christina was allowed to eat. Mm-hmm. But the reality was that it was 4 days. And she said that this would happen. She said it was the only, Christina said it was one of the only things that she really just didn't want to eat was this really rare meat that the mother liked to serve. And so she said at one point it lasted 4 days where the only meal that was offered, she said at one point it turned green and she said it was just repulsive. And, you know,
did she end up eating it?
Well, no, because then remember at some point, you know, if it's green and moldy, you're going to say throw it out.
Good.
But she didn't get to eat any other food. So you've got a kid who is hungry and sad and miserable and hopeless, being like looking at the same disgusting food she didn't want to eat for the last 2 days is now back on her lunch plate and her breakfast plate and everything else. It's really quite disgusting. And that we would call a mental abuse.
Yeah.
You know, I
definitely.
mean, abuse comes in lots of forms.
Yeah.
And certainly that kind of thing. I mean, because what do you do when you have a picky eater? You just say, okay, well, the kid will eat what they need to eat and they'll eat when they're hungry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you know,
I mean,
that's the thing. When a kid won't eat, you say, okay, fine. Like they're not going to die of starvation by lunch. If they don't want to eat what you're serving for breakfast, they can eat at lunch. You know, kids will eat when they're hungry, but this was a power struggle, and that is how Joan saw it. Instead of seeing it as, oh, she's a picky eater, or, oh, she just doesn't like this meat, it was, why do you have to be so difficult? So I'm going to show you I can be tougher than you by forcing you to look at this meal and eat nothing else for 4 days.
Yeah, I was a picky eater, am a picky eater. You know, to this day, I don't like things that are all mixed together. I go to, you know, potlucks or whatever. I'm like, oh, there's a lot of textures in there, and I'm going to crunch something in the middle of this, and I don't like it, and I want to know everything that's in my food. So I am very, very particular in how I eat, and that's how I was when I was a kid. So you may just have somebody who that's the way it is, and the solution that I've heard that's nice is, you know, hey, try something new. Take a one bite. You know, like I call it a no thank you bite. I have one bite. I've tried your whatever broccoli, spinach, carrot casserole, but nope, I tried it, but I don't like it. So, you know, that's a good middle ground when you're dealing with kids who are picky eaters like myself. Now here comes, we would not cover Mommie Dearest without playing this clip. And it's, you know, obviously it's about the dresses and the hanger, which she walks into her room when the child's sleeping and she's probably drunk. It's fair statement. And is going through the closet, looking at the dresses and looking at the hangers. A little controlling, I'm thinking.
Well, and in fact, in this interview that I saw of Christina, this was much later. I think there was an interview I watched from 2010 on Larry King, and she called them night raids. And that does happen when you deal with alcoholic parents or alcoholics living with people in the house. There are times when it's just in the middle of the night they go a bit bonkers, right? Because they're sitting around stewing over the things in their life, and she calls the night raid. She goes in, the kid's sleeping, and just wakes her up and is screaming and is already in a rage, and the kid is sleeping. Imagine how terrifying that would be.
Yeah, they wake you up just to yell at you.
Yeah, like, and I have to say this scene was particularly difficult for me to watch. I have other connections to feeling this way as a kid, and this one in particular, and I think that's why this movie spoke to me so much when I was a kid, because it was kind of like, oh my gosh, like other people have bad times too, like as kids and stuff, and you can get out of these things. But but it was just, now as the adult looking at it, I'm like, oh my God, this was hard to watch.
It was hard to swallow. And Faye Dunaway, you just got to say, this is her iconic role. She did a fantastic job.
And the problem with this is that, I when I said we were going to do this movie, somebody said, oh, yeah, well, and it killed Faye Dunaway's career. I'm not sure it killed it, but what happened was, like she said, that she did extensive therapy. I think she said 3 years of therapy after this movie. She said it was hard for her, and it didn't, and she was ostracized for a while by Hollywood because of the loyalty to Joan Crawford.
Oh.
And it was the first real tell-all book that was made into a movie. And she said that for her, what it was, there's quotes all over the internet on it. She said for her, it was about that she, you adopt these personas, and she was embodying this image of Joan Crawford, living, breathing it for all these months making the movie, and people then associated her with the behavior. When you fall in love with a character in a movie in a positive way, you just assume that actor is just like that character, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it happens the same way for bad guy, characters. Mm-hmm. And she said it was one of those things where people then started associating her in this way, and it was a role. It was just an acting job. And it was hard for her to let it go. It was hard for her to deal with the fallout of it. And so really, she did a great job, but it really took its toll on her personally.
Yeah, I got to say, I believed her the whole time, which is frightening because she was very ugly as far as personality. She was but we got to play this, and it's every time anybody ever sees a wire hanger, don't you think about this clip?
No wire hangers! What's wire hangers doing in this closet when I told you no wire hangers ever? Work till I'm half dead, and I hear people saying she's getting old. What do I get? A daughter! Who cares as much about the beautiful dresses I give her as she cares about me? What's wire hangers doing in this closet? Answer me! I buy you beautiful dresses, and you treat them like they were some ditch rag. You do. $300 dress on a wire hanger. We'll see how many you've got in your hidden some here. We'll see. We'll see. Get out of that bed, let's. All of this is coming out. Out.
Please.
Out. Out.
Please.
Out. You're gonna need more. We're gonna see how many wire hangers you've got in your closet. Why? Christina, get out of that bed. Get out of that bed. You live in the most beautiful house in Brentwood, and you don't care if your clothes are undispatched from wire hangers.
So then she starts to hit her with the wire hangers. Partway through that clip, you and I had eye contact, and it's like it went from wire hangers to all about Joan Crawford.
Yeah.
Me.
And I kept thinking, like, the kid's 10. Like, she's not buying the hangers.
Yeah.
If she doesn't want wire hangers in the closet, then mommy shouldn't put them there. The kid didn't put them there.
Yeah, neither one of my 10-year-olds ever hung up anything, I don't think.
Exactly.
Be happy they hung anything up at all. But,
right, and as you said, it became about Joan. She said, oh, they say I'm getting old, and then I don't even have a great, I don't even have a daughter that likes me. And, it shows what happens when the alcohol and the rage are involved. It's nothing but terrifying at that moment.
Oh, my gosh, yeah. I was chilled to the bone just listening to it again. And that abuse scene went on a lot longer.
Right. And so you cut it off, but literally she really starts beating her with the hanger. And that's where it was, I didn't remember as a kid it being that that violent, but watching it as the adult, I was like, that had to, and then you think about what I was just saying about Faye Dunaway and her takeaway of playing the role, like how that would be difficult to put yourself in that headspace to perform that role. I mean, that scene. Yeah. To then, she seriously beat the kid up.
Yeah, with the hanger.
And then and yes, with the hanger. And then it gets even crazier because then it's come and help me clean the floors. And she's crying. And the daughter is then trying to console Mommy, who is now just totally fallen apart. And, having a nervous breakdown in the middle of the bathroom floor with the scrubbing stuff. And it really is just, but it is classic of abuse. Yeah. I mean, that the kid then ends up having to be the confidant and the best friend and the consolation person, or the consoling person. It sounded wrong, but the person who consoles the abusive parent is often the person who also is at the receiving end of all the extreme violence. And this book was Christina's memoir. She said that her brother also was beat. She said that the brother actually got it worse. Wow. And he's pretty much lives a pretty, private life now. But there were also 5 kids. There were 5 kids in total adopted.
Really?
One of them I think was so Christina was the first, and then I think there was one before Christopher, and I thought how that feels narcissistic to me also to name the kids the same name, Christina and Christopher. Yeah. But it's like George Foreman and all the Georges, right? Doesn't he have 4 George Juniors?
At least.
I don't know. So there was 5 kids. So one of them, though, the adoption, the birth mother took the baby back for some reason in the first year, which is also traumatizing for the parents. So we have to also look at Joan in the context of she comes from a place where the story was that her mother abused her. She came from an abusive background, and she was trying to do how many people do and do better, but she ended up just replaying the same old thing that she knew because it was just all that pressure on her, and she just kept exploding and being abusive. But so there was the failed adoption, then the Christopher, and then there were, I think, twin girls after that. But there's no mention of anybody other than Christina and Christopher in the movie.
Well, I can't imagine if you had a bunch of more kids. I don't want her abusing all the kids. It was hard enough to watch her abuse Tina or Christina. So again, hats off to adoptions back then for rejecting her, because they saw that personality disorder. And there's really nothing you can do. If you're dealing with someone like this, the best thing you could do is get away from this person if you can. But if you're a child or you happen to be married to someone and this personality or this is how they drink starts to come up, you got to wade through it before you can get away with it. But you're not gonna change this person or their personality or their style. They're going to have to want to do something different and seek out therapy or whatever it is that's gonna give them new tools and new skills in order to avoid these types of huge blow-ups. But I don't know that you could do it if they're drinking.
Well, no, and drinking with personality disorders is just a nightmare anyway when you're got that combination in a client. But when you're saying too about not being able to change and the only thing you can do is get away, is because when we talk about personality disorders, we think of the personality as ingrained. And so it's not like you can, at times you can medicate away depression. With therapy and medication, a person can live a life and at times may not even get depressed anymore because they have the coping skills to deal with it. But a personality disorder, as you were saying, is about learning the coping skills. How are they going to cope with the stresses in their life? How are they going to handle the anxiety of the interpersonal relationships when they get too close or they feel of somebody abandoning them? Whereas you can't medicate away a personality disorder. No, as a matter of fact, there are books on how to live, how to live with personality disorder, borderline personality disorder. My favorite little quick read for people dealing with that, I recommend this book all the time. It's probably from the 80s, is I Hate You, Don't Leave Me. Do you know that book? That's a good title, though. It's classic. And when you hear the words, I hate you, don't leave me, it's classic for how the borderline person orients themselves in relationships. They'll hate you one day and then be surprised that you want to leave them. And so that is classically what Joan Collins... I got you doing it. Joan Rivers. Joan Crawford. You can't trick me 3 times. Okay. Joan Crawford, that's classically how she's oriented herself. She beats the kid up, and then is shocked that the kid would rebel against her. It's like, well, you're not showing any love. You're showing a distorted way of attaching.
Right. Yeah, and it was really also, it was just the final nail in the coffin, when she dies, Mommie Dearest dies, and Tina goes up to her and says, I love you, to the coffin. And then, the horrible thing, I'm jumping ahead, but just because you're abused by a parent doesn't mean that that the kids don't love the parents. I work with abused kids all the time. I think every single one of them love their parents, and the parents love the kids. It's just, they can't do it together. You know what I mean? It's like they just get abused.
Right. And I've never met a kid who didn't want to live with the parent, even when the parent was abusive.
Mm-hmm.
When you get kids that have been pulled out of their family system and are in the foster care system, they might be in very loving homes. Things are going well for them. But if you say, okay, well, now change of placement or whatever, where are you going to, who do you want to live with? They will always say, I want to go back home to mom, or I want to go to dad, even if they know that comes with risks or pain.
Right.
They still want to be there with their parent, because parents are supposed to be the only people in life that will always love you, but that love is all twisted up when you've been abused.
Yeah, what does love actually look like?
Exactly.
Although I think I'd adopt a kid if I could get him to do this.
Mommy's not quite ready yet, Mr. Gilbert. Will it be scotch with ice tonight?
Please, take it easy with the scotch, honey.
Okay.
Easy in the scotch, Christina.
Mr. Gilbert, I fix all my uncle's drinks this way.
I am not your uncle.
So let's talk about personality of children who are raised in alcoholic families. I mean, Christina was wonderful. I mean, maybe if I beat my kids a little more and screamed at them and yelled at them and cut their hair and took their dolls and did all these rotten things, my kids would serve me better and clean the floors better.
Then make you a good martini.
Then make me a good glass of scotch. And she did. I mean, ultimately, the reason she got kicked out of the house and sent to boarding school, because in the end, she was bringing her mom a drink and ran into her making out with a guy. It just seems odd.
No, it was because the story behind it was actually she thought she was being like precocious and flirty with the guy. And so, I mean, just shows also the level of that weird borderline / narcissistic thing. Like, nobody is better than me. Mm-hmm. So even if the guy might have said, oh, she's adorable, that could have put Joan on you put the daughter on the radar as a threat to this aging starlet. And so she was essentially sent away for being like precociously like flirty, and which she wasn't, but she also was kind of calling mommy out on, because the guy said, well, I'm not your uncle. And mommy has said all these men are your uncles. And in fact, in that same scene, when she comes back, she does identify the guy as Christina's uncle.
Right.
But we know that he has made that clear that he's not. Yes. So the alcoholic kids, though, fixing the drinks is not unusual.
Nope.
When we have kids and we're not sure what's going on at home, if they ever say they've been fixing drinks, we have to explore that and go, well, I wonder how much drinking is really going on at home between mom and dad, that the kid is getting the beer and knows this type of alcohol that mom and dad drink. But this was like literally she was hosting the guy and making the drink and bringing it in. And so she went on her own to bring the new martini to mom to refresh her, because she knew mom would need a refresher. Yeah.
And in alcoholic homes, we often do have, this star child, right? This super achiever, oftentimes a firstborn who's, just keeping, they're really, they figure out if they can do everything right, they got a better chance at avoiding the abuse and being a favored child and not be, the targeted child, the identified patient or the target. So oftentimes you do get folks, which it's everybody achieves for different reasons. And if you, in the end, do well with it, that's perfectly fine. The scary thing is, and people often ask me, like, should I be a stricter parent or an easier parent? And from the studies I've seen, it's a strict parent gets a very similar result as far as what they get out of their kids to an easygoing parent. It's the inconsistent parent who is strict on some things and easy on the others, and they change. And that's what an alcoholic family is. One day you can leave your shoes by the door. The next day your parent trips over them, and in their drunken stupor, they throw the shoes at you and tell you to put them in your room. And then they wake you up the next morning and they say, hey, you know what? Let's go buy a bike today. It's like, whoa, who is this parent and how do I deal with it? You're gonna make someone mentally ill in those situations.
That's right. And that's a concept, intermittent reinforcement. And I speak about that so much with my clients when we explore like patterns in relationships and dating and stuff. I look back and say, well, what was it like? How did you get attention? Or how did you know you did a good job when you were a kid? And we look for intermittent reinforcement because when they're adults, then they're getting into relationships where they're getting only just enough to keep them involved in the relationship, just enough attention. That's intermittent reinforcement. Yep. And that's exactly what you're talking about. As the kid in that situation, when you gave the example of the shoes are fine one day by the door, the next they constitute getting beat up over because you've done that. And then there's the loving offer after that is the kid then tries to be on their best behavior. That's when you get those perfectionist, neurotic kids that grow into perfectionist, neurotic adults. Mm-hmm. Is they try to, and that's like lovingly said. I know lots of them, and they're lovely people.
Their strengths,
but they drive themselves batty with perfectionism, and they never understand when enough is enough or that they've achieved something, because when they're a kid, they have no idea what's getting the reinforcement. They have no idea why they're getting positively reinforced on a certain day because the parent is being so horrific to them on another day. So they just kind of keep going, well, I know how to be good, so I'll just be good. And they just don't let up, and there's no break, and there's no ability to be a bad kid because they have to be the good kid. It's just their role in the family. Yeah,
my favorite example of intermittent reinforcement is a slot machine, right? Because you put in your coin, you don't know if you're going to hit 2-3 times in a row, or it'll be half an hour, or it'll be 20 minutes, or it'll be 5 minutes, and so when they put pigeons in cages and they have them peck a barred in order to get water, it's the intermittent release of the water that it happens infrequently. It's not predictable, that the pigeon ends up pecking the bar a bazillion times because of the intermittent reinforcement. And if we are giving into our kids, and if you beg me for a candy bar 12 times, you'll get it this time, 15 times next time, 3 times they're going to keep pressing that bar or begging for that candy bar because they know eventually chances are they're going to get what they want. So, on those, parents do have to kind of put down their foot or follow through with what they're going to say as far as putting down their foot, just following through. Mm-hmm. And because if you give in 20 minutes after or 2 drinks after, then the kid's just going to keep pestering you. It's like my kids were pestering me one time, and I'm like, I've said no. Where does asking 1,000 times work? Because I know it's not for me. I mean, I'm not a perfect parent by a long shot, but I knew this one just because of my training. It's like, how is it that you think if you just, and so then what I do is I would go at it with them. Now this is a little passive aggressive and kind of mean, but I would say, ask me slowly. Ask me with a please. Nope. Answer still no. Ask me quickly. Ask me 4 more times. I'll still tell you no, but go ahead and ask. And so instead of, being assaulted and bombarded, I would encourage them to keep doing it, telling them it's not going to change, but I know you're going to ask me 1,000 times. So let's get to that 1,000 really quick, and I'm going to stay the same.
Yes. And on the relationship side of things, I'm thinking of, how does this look? Oftentimes when people get out of a relationship and the other person doesn't want to let it go. Mm-hmm. So they call and they text and whatever, it's that thing that if you answer on the 5th call and say, well, I just figured if I answered and said, I really am not interested, they would just go away. Like what they've actually done is encourage that person to keep calling.
With the intermittent reinforcement.
Right, by knowing that, well, if I keep calling and I pester enough, sooner or later she'll answer or he'll answer. Right. Where it happens in the beginning of relationships is somebody kind of wanting, kind of going along with the new dating relationship, and the person saying, okay, well, let's go out Friday and, like, let's make plans for Friday. But then it's like the week before. But then on Friday afternoon at 2, they call and say, hey, you want to still go out tonight? I thought we were going out. Like, they're reinforcing it in a way that says, here, I'll give you just enough attention, rather than like making a plan like 3 days beforehand or whatever, kind of going, oh, okay, no, you actually were on my agenda and you are important and I want to pay attention to this. It's kind of the afterthought when they've already ran through the week of what everybody else is doing, and then said, well, I'll still call at 2:00 on Friday and see if we can go out tonight. So it's intermittent reinforcement, and it's just enough attention to keep somebody from going, they're really not interested. Oh, wait a minute. No, they are. They called.
Right.
And it's a nightmare. And there's a lot of, I have a lot of single people as clients now, and there's a lot of that going on.
Yeah, I remember when I was single, I would ask someone out, but I wouldn't ask them out for a specific date, time, or event, so that I would find out if they wanted to go out or not. If I say, hey, do you want to go out Friday? And they say, oh, no, I'm washing my hair on Friday. Then I'm like, okay, should I say, how about Saturday? Or are they saying they don't want to go out at all?
Washing the hair, you can tell the last time you dated anyone was 25 years
that's
ago.
Just a joke. But
that's really funny.
yeah. Ha, you love my rejection, don't you, Colleen? So as long as we're sort of the hot, bright lights on people, are you on any dating apps since like we talked last time? Or are you still doing it in real life?
More like, I talk about our episode of Amy Schumer and Trainwreck. My life looks more like that right now than anything else.
Oh, you mean
so there's any number of people around and I'm dating.
Whoa! So the first 20 minutes where it's monogamy isn't realistic. I want to come visit you.
There's monogamy today.
I want to hear these stories.
I'm newly single. I'm having fun. It's a good time.
All right, I will save you.
Thank you.
Yes, let's go on to what I consider probably the most authentic moment out of Mommie Dearest, when Christina now has gone to boarding school. She's had to come home because they can't afford it anymore. Although she says she gets kicked out, and she didn't really get kicked out. But she's talking to Mommie Dearest is talking to Christina and about her fears.
Something else.
And she's crying, by the way.
I lost my contract at Warner's. I don't feel I have anybody. No contract. No studio. No money. I don't know what I could do. I don't know.
It'll be okay.
Comforting.
We'll manage.
I'm scared. I'm scared.
Yeah, so she says, I'm scared. And that's why I call it one of the most realistic moments, because I think she actually used a feeling word here that wasn't just anger, So it's like, it felt authentic, although as soon as I say that, it's kind of like the flip side of she goes from persecutor to victim. I guess she kind of rescues somewhere around that persecutor rescue victim triangle, but it's more poor me. But I didn't see it as her being drunk, which is typically where they get in touch with their sad, scared emotions. But it was authentic, and it gave Tina a chance to say, hey, you know what, whatever, we're gonna do this as a family, and it'll be okay. And she's comforting her mom.
Right, but then there's like 5 minutes later in the movie, she finds out that after mom says, oh, I've gone broke and you need to get a work study program at school and all this stuff, mom then went on a shopping spree. And Christina says, oh, did she just buy these? So then she realizes all the consoling and the way that she had to dig deep in herself to get the emotions to comfort her mother during this, because that's not her natural, is because she's normally just scared of her. So here she had to go and console her. She then feels taken advantage of and manipulated again, that now she's on work study because mom is still on a spending spree and is not quite as broke as she's saying.
Yeah, well, broke is relative, right? She
That's
lives in a mansion with. She could have just sold some of those wire hanger dresses, and they'd had tuition.
That's right.
All right. So after this, she goes. This was interesting, and I'll let you comment on it after we do it. Tina walks up on her mom and can't quite figure out what happened to her.
Something's happened.
What's the matter?
I don't know. like this. I think she needs an ambulance.
She doesn't need an ambulance. She's drunk.
Not strange, right? Kids seeing their parents when they're passed out and having to take care of them.
Right, but Christina's like 17. For me, that scene just was kind of odd to me that at like 16, 17, she gets scared that something has happened to her mother instead of just going, oh, she's drunk.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was very naive. And I thought, well, that was really a weird exaggeration of their life, because you grow up with a mother who's passed out all the time. Why
Right.
is this time do you think something's the matter with her?
You know, I thought about that because you wrote that in the notes. I thought maybe it was because she was off at boarding school during her teenage high school years, and this might have been the time. But I imagine when she was writing the book, she's like, I remember the first time I had to find Mom, who was drunk and passed out, and I was scared. She resembled a dead person. So maybe it wasn't at that age, but I'm sure she had a first time.
Yeah, and it could also be because I also thought that maybe it was also soon after that scene of I lost my contract, I've gone broke. Maybe she thought that she had overdosed herself or done a suicide attempt or something like that. Mm-hmm. But I did think, though, on the drunk side of things, the alcoholic child side of things, it was kind of naive to show that at that age.
Yeah.
But how powerful it would have been to show her at 5.
Yeah.
Getting scared when she finds her passed out on the couch, because that is usually the experience of children.
Yeah, you know what?
Alcoholic families.
You know what's funny is I had it in my head. If we go back to, remember she poured the scotch for her quote unquote uncle, and then she went and poured another glass behind the bar. Tina did. I thought Tina was going to drink it.
I did too. Did too, and which again would be
normal.
It happens, right? Yep. Kids just model the parents' behavior.
Absolutely. Some time goes by, and Mommie Dearest ends up marrying another man, and Tina comes home and has this conversation with her mom prior to ever meeting this guy. She went off and got married without, I guess her daughter didn't go to the wedding. I don't know what happened. So she did what she wanted, and she got married, and here's this.
Darling, my daughter's here. I'll talk to you before we leave. Love to you, too.
Hello, Mother.
Christine, I want you to meet my husband.
What do I call him?
Well, what would you call anyone who's your father? Go introduce yourself.
Okay, so most of the time, people grow up in families and they live with their parents, or maybe even if they get divorced or whatever. So you don't have to encounter this, but you do if they get remarried. It's like, what do you call them? And so I get that question. It's like, and you hear from mom when there's a stepmom, and then the child starts to call the other mom, and they get worried about it. And it happens in foster care too. Foster parents, the kids want to call their foster parents mom sometimes, and the biological parent gets upset or threatened or whatever. And I always think of mom as a occupation, right? Like not like it's a job, but you have a certain amount of duties, and if you do these duties in a child's life, then you become mom. And besides, and people don't think about this often, if it's in foster care, adoptive, step families, whatever, when a kid says, hey, do you want to come to my party on Saturday on the playground? And then they go home, they're getting ready to go home, and they say, well, I got to ask my mom. Well, that's different than I got to ask my stepmom, my foster mom, my adoptive mom. So they just want to say mom. And besides, if there are other kids in the family, everybody's calling this lady who runs the household mom. I'm going to call her mom too. If we all called her June, I would call her June. But in this case, I call her mom. So although this is really weird because she's, I think, an adult, and she tells her to call him daddy.
I thought it was odd because I don't know, maybe I'm more of the school of like the step parent, right? She didn't know the guy. That, what do you call him? Well, a lot of times they do call step parents by their first names. Jim. Right, until you get to know the person and kind of establish rapport and trust in a relationship. And not for nothing, like Joan, this was not the first marriage that she had. Not about being the two before that, but there was even, I think, another marriage during the childhood. There was a lot of men around, and all of a sudden now there's not an uncle, there's a daddy, and it just felt very awkward. And it was awkward to see this grown woman, young adult woman, walk up and say, hey, nice to meet you, daddy.
Yeah. Yeah. So what to call, I always say, go with what the kid wants to call you. or if I can be dad and their daddy, or their pop, or their Jim. Personally, I think from an adult perspective, call me what you want to call me. Occasionally my teenagers will try to get my wife's goat by calling her Deborah, or dude. It's like, really, your mom? It's your mom, and she's not even a dude. But so we hold on to a little bit of proper. But unless a parent wanted to call themselves a certain thing, I just have like my kids' friends call me whatever they want to call me. I personally don't stand on, you must call me Mr. Calkins, because that's my dad and he's a teacher, so he can have that one. So do you make kids call you anything? They call you Miss Colleen or Ms. Colleen or?
No, and I'm always thrown by that because that's not the world I grew up in. We didn't have Miss and Mr. It was you either, you called the adult. If they said, call me Colleen, then you call them by their first name. Otherwise, I would go with whatever the parent said, oh, call me this or call me that. So when I hear Miss Colleen, like, that's so odd to me, and maybe it's a California kind of culture. I don't know. I just didn't grow up with that, where the adults were Miss this and Mr. that with a first name. Yeah. So, but yeah, I'm Colleen to everybody.
Yeah. 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 A lot of times in preschool and those types of things, their teachers are Miss Tina or Miss Sally or whatever. Okay.
That's the part that I miss without having kids. I don't know that culture.
Okay. Well, this I thought was actually one of the more powerful scenes, and one that we can work with a little bit. But of course, it starts with a fight. Tina has just embarrassed her in front of a reporter by actually saying her truth. And I think this is a pivotal moment in their relationship, where I think Tina is saying, look, I am an adult and I will go with the truth and not your Hollywood spin on whatever it is. I'm going to stand firm on this. And just to let you know, there are 2 slaps. Both of them are from Mommie Dearest to Tina.
Why do you deliberately defy me?
Why did you tell her I got expelled?
Because you did get expelled!
That is a lie.
You love it, don't you? You love to make me hit you!
Joan!
You deliberately embarrassed me in front of a reporter! A reporter? I told you how important this is to me! I told you!
Why did you adopt me?
What?
Why did you adopt me?
Because I wanted a child. Because I wanted someone to love.
Don't you act for me. I want to know. Why did you adopt me?
Maybe I did it for a little extra publicity. That's not true. You know that's not true.
Maybe just a little true.
Why did you adopt me? Finally, that question. It's like, what, did you just want somebody to kick around, someone to be better than? Why did you adopt me? I thought that was a great question, because you do start to wonder if they're just going to get in the way and be obnoxious and send them off to boarding school and have the maid take care of them. Why did she want them at all to begin with?
Yes. And if we are going with Joan having borderline personality disorder, there is sincerity in that she really probably did believe she was going to be a good mom at some point.
Yeah, she's great at everything.
Right. Why wouldn't she be good at that?
Yeah.
But then there's that publicity line was thrown in there. And we should say this scene ends with Mommie Dearest choking Christina on the ground.
Great fight scene. To me, it was hilarious because it was so absurd, but it was frightening at first.
But that stuff happens.
Oh, my gosh.
That stuff happens. And so Christina challenged her at the end of this somewhere, said, I'm not one of your fans, just like she did when she was little, and said, I'm not a fan. But this time, as soon as she said that, Joan tackled her and literally was choking her until the reporter, there was a magazine reporter doing a story on her in the house, the reporter and one of the housemaids came to pull her off. And so then everybody saw the abuse and to the extent of the abuse.
Yeah, and for as much of the Razzies as this thing got, and we've talked about what a great acting job she did, I wanted Tina to fight back. I wanted her to, just jab her in the eye or do something. I wanted her to battle back, because I wanted to see Joan get what she deserved.
I think there's that dilemma that goes on for kids that are abused. They usually don't. I mean, like, you get scared, and not even just scared that the parent will always be able to overpower you, but what if you did get in a good punch on that parent?
Yeah.
What are they going to do to you next? She already had her hands around her throat.
Yeah.
What was she going to do? And in that particular scene, in her recounting of it, Christina has said in interviews that she really truly believed she was going to die in that scene.
Yeah, she probably would have.
Moment, and she could have.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, I can only think of once in my life where I saw red, quote unquote, where I was out of control. My buddy came to the door. I was in high school and I was making out with a chick. And he lit a bunch of firecrackers on my porch, which is a funny thing for one high school kid to do to another. And we were best friends. And I chased him out of the house, grabbed him, and I grabbed him by the, like got him in a headlock. And then I kind of like came to, and I'm like, oh, whoa, okay. So I understand, people do see red. I just can't get there very often, but I know a lot of people that they do. They all of a sudden they're 5 minutes into this tirade and they go, what am I? What? It's almost like they wake up out of this emotional stupor. So I think that's probably what happened to Joan.
Well, and I also often talk with people about like crossing that line of appropriateness, right? Once you do that, once you cross over, you almost have to finish what you started. Like there's no turning back. It's like when you commit a crime of some kind. Like once you decide you're going to do it, it goes haywire, right? And you have to finish the job. I think of stories of people, professionals who have crossed boundary lines, and then the stories just get really all sorts of twisted and ugly. Just in our own profession, I don't know if you read the Therapist magazine.
Oh, that's the
disciplinary accidents.
That's the only part I read now.
Yeah, me too.
I want to see what bad.
Like, yeah, you can tell.
Yeah.
But when the parent though abuses a kid, they cross that line, and like I said, it felt like she had to finish the job there. And really in that scene, it felt like if nobody came to her rescue, it would have been that Joan Crawford, the story would have been that she turned into a murderer instead of just an abusive parent going down in history. Right.
Well, she had to escalate it because Tina was slapped twice and didn't react. And that's why you love to make me hit you, because she had to escalate it because she could always dominate her physically before. And so she just had to raise the stakes in order to get obedience. They think that actual physical abuse gets obedience, which I find interesting. I mean, it might get compliance, but that's not what you want. You don't want someone doing it just because they're afraid you're going to beat them. But, who says that this is a logical situation? It's really not. You're acting on instinct and history and emotion. You're not being rational and logical in these relationships. Okay, well, we got a couple more we got to jump into. Things turn south for Joan, and she starts to lose some money.
I want us to look great, and I want us to live well, but there's a limit. We're going into debt.
Now, you're a great businessman. You and your company have found yourselves a movie star to sell your soda pop. Well, you've got to pay the price.
Come on, Pally, be reasonable. You've got everything you need for this place. Just look at this joint.
Genius of the soft drink world. Get the goddamn company to pay the bills.
I guess she's just been able to argue her way into everything she wants, is what it sounds like.
Well, and what she did is she manipulated the men all the time to get what she wanted. And this one stuck around until it pretty much killed him. Yeah. And then that narcissistic expectation that the fans expect her to live a certain way.
Yeah.
And one that last scene too about the story of like getting expelled and the daughter challenging her that was a lie. That was a lie. And so Joan would come up with stories that were going to fit the persona she wanted everybody to think that she was. So if her daughter was this derelict in private school and got expelled, she becomes the martyr. And that was the story she was putting out there. And so she believes her own crazy lies, and then she believes what she thinks everybody is expecting of this Hollywood starlet and this business mogul. So she puts the demands on him until he literally mortgages everything and dies of exhaustion.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you think that she would know that it was a lie, but like you just said, they start to believe their own lie. They start to believe that she was expelled when she wasn't expelled. But maybe if Joan was the headmistress or whatever, she would have expelled her. But so,
right, in Joan's school, she was expelled.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the story that she wanted to tell. And so the truth is somewhat subjective in her world. There's no objective reality, even though the daughter said, Tina said, I'm taking a stand, and I'm not just going to let you lie to a reporter about what happened, and I'm going to confront you. And then she had to raise the stakes and then try to choke her out. It really wasn't that good a choke. She, I watch a lot of UFC. She could have put a good armbar on her or something like that. Maybe got a submission out of her. Tina should have tapped out. That's what should have happened. All right. So is there no end to Mommie Dearest and the grandiosity that she has? Well, she's not going to play her role. She's going to play her daughter's role. Oh, wait. Let me pause. She's in the hospital bed because Tina is in the hospital bed because she had an ovarian cyst, which was benign. She was working on a soap opera. And so she had to leave her part because, as everybody knows, soap operas, especially back then, I think they were shot live and on the day of. So so her role had to be vacated when she was sitting in the hospital. And then this is a scene where the nurse comes in and is talking to Tina about how she's feeling, and then this happens.
Your TV show's on. Don't you want to watch?
To see how well they manage without me.
To see your mother. They just announced your mother is going to stand in for you until you're well.
Oh, she can't. My character's only 28 years old.
But that doesn't stop the narcissist, does it? She goes in there and plays a 28-year-old romancing this 20-something-year-old man, and it looked funny. But maybe I think that happens on soap operas a lot. Maybe.
I don't think so. I mean, I don't think anybody would watch that.
Oh, I think they do.
If that was really happening.
No, but I think, if they switched it, but...
Well, I mean, for how she looked at the time, I mean, she was probably into her 60s, or at least looked like that in the persona that they were, and the character they were having her play. But as the daughter says, well, she can't do that. The character's 28. Yeah. So it was really awkward. Then you see Joan, flub the lines, and then take Swiss...
shots of vodka.
Shots out of her flask.
Yeah.
And people just expect her to do it. They bring her a glass for it, Yeah. And she's expected to just drink a few swigs in between scenes, and smoke. It was pretty much a disaster.
Yeah, she's smoking on the set during the takes. They're smoking cigarettes. I thought it was hilarious. Yeah, though I gotta confess, I was a big watcher of All My Children in high school because I could go home at lunch and that was what was on. So I would watch All My Children. Erica Kane definitely dated younger, a lot younger, many younger kids. So that's. Anyway, so it's really more about Joan just saying, "Oh, I can do it," and of course, why wouldn't they want a Hollywood movie star on a soap opera?
That's it. It was as if she was doing them a favor.
Yeah.
Not like, let me do this because I have nothing else going on and I can help out my daughter. Right. It was, I'm doing you a favor because you've got me on the set.
Yeah, I'm a movie star, and they're going to announce it. So before we get to the last clip, we can be found at Shrink. Actually, I don't know if you know this, Colleen. On Twitter, we're also Shrink, but all that does is point Shrink the number 2 Shrink. So we're shrinktoshrink.com, and you have your own podcast, Coaching Through Chaos. How do they reach out on that one?
They can find me, of course, where all the podcasts are, but also coachingthroughchaos.com is my regular website. They can also check out more of what I do in my day job as a therapist and the practice and the people working there and what we've got going on. But we've got Coaching Through Chaos, comes out pretty much monthly. We're a little bit slow these days, but it's a resource for people. So we cover all sorts of different psych topics, but then they can also find me on Twitter. So now I'm realizing we have 1 million Twitter accounts. My Twitter account is at Dr. Colleen Mullen, and they can find me on Facebook now. I'm doing live chats every Tuesday at 3:30 Pacific time, and I'm picking some type of life management topic and doing like a 10-15 minute live chat every Tuesday at 3:30. So that's facebook.com/Dr. Colleen Mullen.
Okay, I don't really understand. I'm interested now. You always hook me with these new products. What is this thing you got?
I'm always doing something.
Yeah, what do you do? You're going on and you're like Dr. Laura or Dr. Phil, or just taking calls, or what are you doing?
And actually, I'm calling it a live chat. I think the word is like live Facebook live video. So
Okay.
I mean, I'd certainly interact with people as they're on there, but I'm picking a topic and talking about it. So I've talked about don't text when angry. I've talked about communication in early dating relationships, and I haven't decided what I'm going to do this week, but I'm thinking more like anxiety management, and I'm going to just talk about a couple of tips to help people. So I'm not becoming anybody's therapist on Facebook. I'm just doing it as, again, like kind of being more of a helpful resource.
So can they find that?
And I love interacting with everybody. So it's been a lot of fun to do.
Can they find that on facebook.com and then Coaching Through Chaos?
Actually, it's actually coming from my personal page, which is open anyway. So facebook.com/Dr. Colleen Mullen.
Oh, okay.
The problem with the business one is that nobody was getting notified. I've been doing it a couple of times on Coaching Through Chaos, which everybody, you can go and like that page, but the interaction is going to happen on my personal page because it seems to be that Facebook more easily notifies everybody of it going live.
Yeah, I get the notifications.
That page.
Okay, so and you just did a Coaching Through Chaos on suicide, and I wanted to know, do you know, have you watched the Netflix show 13 Reasons Why?
I'm actually going to watch it this weekend or tonight. Everybody's recommending it. It was a little bit too much when I was doing the episode because it actually was part of my own process of talking about losing a sibling to suicide. Mm-hmm. So that's the current episode of Coaching Through Chaos. And it was with a suicide expert who gave us information, but they also interviewed me and allowed me to process on the air as hopefully something that can help others that are struggling with that. So I didn't actually watch that show yet, but I saw the premise and I thought, well, when I'm all done with that episode, I'll go ahead and watch it.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but I've talked to people who have, and it's interesting insights. Again, it's about how perception can become reality no matter how off your perception of what is going on is happening. But because it's all filtered by our own experience. It's like if this event would have happened and you were in a different place in your life, it would have been a benign nothing event. But because of where you were in your life, all of a sudden it's significant, and it adds to one of the reasons why you believe you're legitimate, or have a legitimate reason to commit suicide. Well, speaking of death, Joan dies. QuadFather MFT at Quadcast, or at QuadFather MFT, Quadcast podcast, they're everywhere. It's fine. You can find me. If you look, you will find. Okay, so Joan dies, and Tina goes to, as I said before, goes to her casket, says, "I love you, Mom." Kind of this proves what we were talking about, or represents what we were talking about. No matter how abused you are, there's still some part of you that probably loves your parent. And if you've gotten some therapy after, you learn how to keep yourself safe while being in relationship with your parent and not subject yourself to that abuse once more. But she says that to her dead mom with nobody around. She's not doing it for show. So then it comes to the reading of the will. Anything you want to say before we go into this clip, Colleen?
No, Courtney.
All right, well, let's head on.
I'll let you lead us right in.
As the attorney reads to Christina and Christopher the will from her mother.
This is the section pertaining to you and Christopher. It is my intention to make no provision herein for my son Christopher, or my daughter Christina, for reasons which are well known to them.
What reasons?
Jesus Christ.
As usual, she has the last word.
Does she? Does she?
And
well,
that's where the movie ends.
Right. And so, of course, does she have the last word? She doesn't. Christina went and wrote the book that has now become the movie.
Right.
on the note of seeing the interviews with Christina, she said she, at the time in 2010, one of the interviews that I watched one from the 80s and then one in 2010. She said she had only seen the movie one time and that she didn't actually think it was a representation. She thought it was very much over-exaggerated what had happened, and that the book was really meant as, something to help others going through abuse have some camaraderie and that they weren't alone in it. And she was disappointed with how the movie was portrayed, but she sold the rights to it, so she had no access or a say over what they did with it. So I thought that was interesting, but it was this thing, though. I mean, again, though, when we look at the pattern of abuse, there were then, so again, now this is also in the context of other kids in the family that we don't know about from the movie. And so Christopher and Christina were cut out of the will. So we can assume that the others maybe weren't, because it was only specific to those two who were the ones on the receiving end of the abuse.
And my initial take usually on something like this is, okay, why would Tina, who was abused by her mom, spend all this extra time and energy basically outing her, right? Because that's how that movie ends. Oh, I'll show the world that you were not who you were. You want the last word? I got the last word. Well, that's typically, I kind of shy people away from that, because all you're doing is, even when people say, I'm going to be successful and I'll show my mom or my dad how great I could be. Well, okay, that's good, but you're still orienting yourself towards that person. And Tina oriented herself towards her mom. But I would say that in this case, it was probably very therapeutic for her to process all of this out of herself and also to hold it up for the world to see, because nobody knew that her mom was like this. And so she's saying, look, this is the reality. I'm not crazy. I live with a crazy person who denied that she was ever like this, but I'm going to let the world know. So I think it was actually therapeutic and helpful for her. At least I would hope that it would. Usually journaling or writing, which I assume she did, is very therapeutic and helpful and helps you process things. I think some of the ways that I learned to be in relationship and in my own life are the direct result of probably about 4 or 5 years of journaling every day. Like late high school, early college, and I would just journal all the time. Because when you write, it forces your mind to be linear. You can't perseverate. You can't repeat. When we think about things in the same thing over and over and over. But when we go to therapy and we talk about it, we don't have that redundancy all the time. And when we write, we don't have the redundancy, but in our head we do. So writing can be very therapeutic. And I hope this was very therapeutic for Tina when she was writing about her mother.
What I heard her say was that she had written it initially just for the family. And I don't quite know how she was going to use that with the family. I think she meant for like other generations to come. But then she said she sent it to like a writer friend in New York to look it over and maybe to edit it. And somebody came back to her and said, you really need to publish this. So that's her story about how it came to be a public book. And then she went on to write at least one novel. I'm not sure she wrote others, but she's not living as a writer today that I know of. The writing, yes, was very cathartic according to what she was saying. And I gotta say, Courtney, good credit to you for all that journaling you did.
Oh, it was fun.
That's pretty amazing to have that history of your own writing. I wonder, do you ever go back and look at it?
I don't. And when we moved one time, I prided myself on the fact that I threw a couple boxes away without even looking at them. But I did discover that I do have them. But when do I let my kids do it? Read my stuff. I don't want them to read it yet. Not from college. Yeah, exactly.
Do you think you would? That's an interesting prospect.
Would
you let your kids read your journal?
Absolutely. I wouldn't have a problem with it when they're a certain age. Both my parents journal. Do I have any interest in them reading those? Not particularly. It's their life, their experience, their process. I mean, maybe when they're dead and gone, and that's one of the things that I have of them left. But yeah, I wouldn't. I don't. Well, I might preview it before I let them read it.
Yeah, I would think before you hand it over, you might pick and choose chapters they can read.
Right, but
they can read from 16 to 17, but not 19 to 20.
Yeah. But really, it is just my process, and it's really where I was. So, and sometimes when I journal, I would just sit down and write. I can't think of anything to write right now, and then I would kind of get through my writer's block that way. But anyway, I think journaling is very helpful if you are that way. Podcasting, very therapeutic also. Hopefully we didn't re-traumatize anybody or initially traumatize anybody, but but it did traumatize me watching this movie. But I hopefully we shed some light on it, and we're able to pull out some of the things that actually you could learn, you could benefit from. Certainly, just don't be like Joan. Don't be like, what is her name? Joan Collins? Joan Rivers?
Joan Crawford.
Joan Embry? Okay, Joan Crawford. Don't be like
Embry. She's the animal woman, right?
Yeah.
Who's that? Okay.
Yeah, she's like Johnny Carson.
Out.
Well, not a lot of Jones. All right, so don't be like don't be like Joan Crawford. Don't be a Mommie Dearest. So until we see you at the last day of every month, we post a new movie. Enjoy your mother. Enjoy Mother's Day. Be a good mom, and be good to your mom. And we will see you next month, and we will save a seat on the movie couch for you.
Happy Mother's Day. See you next time.
No wire hangers.
Woohoo!